Hello there. I have a very exciting video to make today. I have published my first book. It is titled Spiral Ethics, a framework for acting with care in a chaotic world. So, I have been interested in ethics for a very long time, since I was, gosh, well, since I was a teenager. I read through all of Nietzsche's books that I could get my hands on. Um, I read about virtue ethics, by Aristotle. I've read a great many things, and none of them really scratched the itch, I suppose. And it became apparent to me that I wanted to make my own kind of framework. And I will say, as a caveat to this, that I'm not sort of a scholar. Um, yes, I am well read, but I'm not. Um, it's not what I did for my university degree. I have a law degree in LLB, which I made clear there because I wanted just, people to know what particular background I came from. Um, so I thought for this I would introduce what this means and see if I can incentivize people to have a look at it. Essentially, I imagined ethics in terms of a spiral rather than, you know, in Buddhism they've got like the seven spoke wheels and is it seven spoke? I can't remember, but they've got like wheels and such. But I thought, well, if we can't ever really know the consequences of our actions, what it doesn't make sense to have a complete return. So surely ethics and indeed action in general operates like a spiral. There is no sort of like final end, no telos, which is what Aristotle kind of thought up. There is no final end in my own point of view, and I actually call determinism sort of a kind of failure of ethics in this, which is a bit harsh, but um, that's part of my theory. Um, so I defined it with four elements: recurrence, essentially just recurring patterns, which are pretty self evident at this point, I think. Um, Weight. So, this is ethical weight, which is something that is created by any kind of action. Any action creates a sort of a weight um, to it. And memory. So, the ethical weight is going to leave a residue that reshapes future action, future movement, and continuation. Um, so it will just continue. Um, and all of these I tend to think of as rather self-evident, but it was important at the beginning of my book to set it out step by step. And so the ethical maxim is essentially act as if your action will be remembered, re-encountered, and relived under increased ethical weight. And so any ethical theory that privileges one configuration of humanity over another disobeys the fundamental principle of recurrence. So biases held against particular ethnicities, religions, genders, disabilities, and even animals and other non-living human organisms, such as fungi and mosses and such, uh, will introduce asymmetries that cannot survive. They're not sustainable. And I thought it was important. Well, this isn't about sort of like ecology. Um, I still see that as an important element because, you know, especially the ways that we are living as a society at the moment are not very aligned with our continued existence and our continued sustainability. So I wanted that to be an element of it. But at the end of the day, this isn't a very long book. It's only 60 pages, I think. But I didn't want to over do the over sort of explain myself. Perhaps I will do something else in the future, but I don't think I want to over explain myself. I hope that anyone who has an open mind can have a read and understand where I'm coming from. Um, so something else is I create virtues. So I sort of draw from virtue ethics in that regard, is that I do create my own spiral virtues. I can give a little taste of them now. They are 7 of them: coherence, continuity, bearing, restraint, fidelity, endurance, and mercy. And then there are derived ones from these: patience, discernment, loyalty, gravity, grace. And I didn't want to get too. So, this is a secular book, just to put it out there. While I am a religious person, I didn't want to make a religious set of ethics because I know that not everyone is religious in this day and age, and I wanted something that was much more broadly applicable. So, you won't find any sort of appeals to a sense of God or Allah or any of that. That's not the function of this book, and that's it's not supposed to do that. Basically, just to set expectations, and yeah, I also have heuristics, which is essentially just something that's kind of like a guiding principle, I suppose. And that's something else that I use in this guidance. And another part of it is that I mention times in which ethics fail, and I codify particular patterns of failure in my own observations. And I am sure that a lot of the stuff that I talk about in this book, other people have sort of thought up themselves as well. Because at the end of the day, I am not unique. I am just a young man myself with a lot going on up here, for better or worse. But I wanted to write something that meant something, and I hope will genuinely provide moral clarity and guidance for people who are interested, because I am tired of reading about ethics and essentially just getting the feeling that, it's simply not hitting the nail on the head, it's not scratching the itch, it's not rigorous enough, it's not. It assumes, I put in the book, and maybe I was a bit harsh, but I put most ethical frameworks assume ideal conditions. And I know that's a bold claim, but I'm going to be honest, a lot of them do. They don't think very deeply about, people with disabilities, people who have differences in neurocognitive types, essentially just people who have autism and such. And while I don't go into that in depth, it's a part of it because it has to be, because I am disabled myself. So, yeah. I don't want to sort of read the entire book out for people, because then what is the point of having it as a book? But I think it's important that I flesh out the parts about where ethics fail. So when the fundamentals of ethical action break down, there are recognizable patterns, and I put those into three. You have tyrants, martyrs, and abdicators. And the tyrant will externalize ethical weight. Tyrants will act and displace weight generated from their actions onto other people without their consent. Although consent is a whole other thing. I mean, we could talk till the cows come home about what it really means to consent, but, putting that aside, it's essentially when you act without internalizing those actions, you externalize it. It creates an asymmetry of power. And then the martyrs are ones who are bearing ethical weight, but they do not have the agency to change those conditions. And abdicators are those who do not actively externalize their actions onto others, but they don't bear it either, but they will relinquish responsibility. And this is the most insidious because it permits the conditions that allow tyrants and then martyrs to exist in their own sort of like unhealthy feedback loops, if you will. And then I went into forms of abdication. I don't want to get too into it, but I'll read them out. Proceduralists, functionaries, legalists, determinists, and egoists. And yes, I'm borrowing terminology from other sort of, I did jurisprudence at university. There's so many different thinkers who've used these terms. They're so general at this point that I felt comfortable to just use them and define them how I would use them in this. Shoot me down if that's a problem for you, but I wanted to sort of just explain how I was thinking. And I'm gonna leave it at that because I hope people purchase it and have a read of it themselves, because I do genuinely think that it will be useful for folks, A, who are interested in ethics, and B, who would like some sort of ethical guidance, some sort of unifying theory that would help them think about the world and think about how they act in the world as it is right now, because ultimately we are encountering crises that are unprecedented, with the climate crisis, with ongoing conflicts, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, you've got Israel-Palestine conflict, which is just horrific. And then just this morning, I heard about, Iran being attacked by America and Israel. So much going on in the world that is not good. It is chaotic. And thankfully, I live somewhere where there isn't active threats of war. I'm very privileged for that, but it still weighs on the mind, because at the end of the day, you can't live in somewhere that is privileged and shut your eyes to everything else. That's how you become a bystander. That's how you become an abdicator. And I suppose a caveat to that, and it's one that I make in this book, is that, you can't then, there is a difference between being engaged versus becoming a martyr. Martyr is a failure of ethics in this. And you have to, you know, remain joyous and remain light and humorous. These are still things that are very important. And so, essentially, I envisage ethical action as this spiral that just continues to flow, and it becomes deeper as it goes. You know, the whole point is that you grow by deepening, and deepening means you become more knowledgeable, you become more able to carry more weight, more responsibility, and you're able to translate that into certain actions, like speaking up, like like writing about things that are important, about issues that are important, and doing what you can to be ethical. And I know these are big topics, like what does it really mean to be ethical? The way I see it is it's a way of just being aligned with the world you live in reality, not just up here, but genuinely, the whole of it. Not just your own family, not just your garden, but caring for the whole world, as it were, um, proportionally, but importantly. Um, yeah, I mean, I could go on, perhaps, but I don't want to labour the point too much. Um, Ultimately, I hope people have a read of my book. It is scary putting myself out there though, and I am not by nature a very. I don't like being in the spotlight, basically. But I wanted to produce something that I think will be helpful to people, will move the conversation on, I would say, I would hope, and just something people can reference to when, you know, it isn't necessarily clear what to do. And I don't provide much clarity, you know, at the end of the day, the world is incredibly complicated, and one may never know enough to make the right decisions, and there aren't any right decisions per se. It's just keeping the spiral going without poisoning it. And there are a lot of things that poison the spiral, and the main thing is prejudice and bias against things that will naturally reoccur. Things like people of different religions, things like, shocker here, transgender people, like myself, things like disabled people, um, other species, animals, the very planet that we live on, and the conditions of which we all need to live, you know. So, yes, I don't think I can do links still, but please look it up on Author House, um, which is where it is for sale. Those are the publishers that I went with because their service was really good. What can I say? And I believe it's £10.99 to buy because it's just a standard paperback, which I don't think that's much to ask for a nice little book. It looks really nice. Look at it. It's not very big. It's not very long, so it won't labour your attention spans. But yes. Hold on. Let's go. There we go. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Goodbye.